I love you. You're thinking, what's he going to say? What's he going to say now? I love you. And you might think, well, like, we've known each other for a few years. Yeah, what does that mean? How does that... I love you. And you know how I love you? I love you because you are human. And I love the incredible, unique aspects of each person. I just heard somebody say that a stranger is someone you haven't heard the story of yet. Once you hear their story, you're now friends. I've heard it some churches say you come once and you're a visitor, and you come twice and you're family. And I think that's a really wonderful orientation that people have to building relationships. But I love you. I love people that are all their unique qualities and their beautiful variety that they have, each person. Now, here's the caveat. If you are not being yourself, not contributing, presenting your uniquenesses, trying to be or trying to become or trying to appear to be someone other than yourself, then honestly, I can't love you. Because I can't love you because I don't know you. In order to know somebody, you have to know, in order to love somebody, you have to know them. There are many things in our society, there are many dynamics and pressures and pulls and influences that try and drive us to become something that we're not. There's standards that are set out there. I know whenever I see, did you see Top Gun? I was like, I need to start doing push-ups or something, anything. Because there's something about a certain image that gets in our head and we think, if I'm like that, maybe I'll be more lovable. If I look like that, or if I act that, how cool somebody else is, maybe I'll be more loved, more appreciated. And so we try and change ourselves. It's not to say that there isn't room for advancement or for growth, but to set a standard of somebody else being who we want to become like, then it sets up this arbitrary metric for success or attainability or something like that. A couple of my friends are actors, and one of my friends said something that I hope I'll never forget. She said that when her teacher told her, when you go into an audition, no matter how many people are sitting in that room for that role, there is no competition. No matter who's there, no matter how many people, no matter how successful they are, no matter how famous they are, there's no competition when you walk in that room. Because if you are truly being yourself. Because when a director or a casting agent, when they see you, if they like you, they'll like you. And there's only one you. So really, no matter where you go, there's no competition. Now, if you're trying to be somebody else, well, there's already another one of those. Or if you're trying to be like some particular idea in your head, that idea is out there in the public, and other people are trying to strive for that too. Now there's competition. But if you are truly, ultimately, yourself, in the workplace, in any sort of competition like that, maybe even in relationships, there's no competition. There's nothing else, but it's just you. Because there's only one you. And just like the Greek philosopher said, I'm forgetting who, to know yourself, that is a lifelong role, a lifelong activity, to know who you are. It is a process that takes time. It takes investigation. And with this train of thought, I dare ask you to consider that if you truly are trying to be something other than who you are, how can you ever really truly know that God loves you too? Because you really have never presented yourself fully to God. It's always been some edited version, some manicured, very carefully crafted version of yourself, to where you go before God, maybe in prayer, and your language changes, or the things that you talk about and the things you don't talk about are very carefully selected. And you present that best face forward to God, while you know what happened yesterday, and you say some general, "Oh Lord, forgive me of my sins," and you move on with the prayer into the, "Oh, but God, you are wonderful," and all these accolades. Is that any different than how you are with your teacher at school, or your boss at work, or your spouse, or your children, or like trying to keep things together so that way you can be accepted, that you can be respected, instead of people getting to know who the real person is, and that fear, that nagging concern that maybe you might not be accepted by them, your friends, your family, or God is there? You know, there's a really neat story about a life experience of Amy Carmichael. I think I've mentioned her here before. Amy Carmichael, I believe she was in the late 1800s. I read her biography, and if you're interested in her biography, I will get you her biography in audio or in a paper form. I will get you it, because her story is just incredible. As a young girl, she grew up and she saw the disparity. When she first was brought to Jesus by herself, in her own experience, her own relationship with God. And as she got older, she recognized that there were people that didn't know about Jesus, and she wanted them to know about Jesus. This was in England, and she saw that there were these a large group of working women. They by slang called them the shawlies, the ladies that were too poor to afford a hat, so they take their shawl and they put it over their head as they walked outside. And so the people would just say, "Oh, the shawlies." You know, this working class of people, kind of uncouth at times, a bit rough around the edges. But she saw them, and as she got to know them, she saw that they needed Jesus. She talked to them in the streets. And then pretty soon there were enough ladies that were coming together that she said, "We have to find a place to meet." And so she started talking about Jesus in a particular venue, to where eventually she asked during the week for the church, "Can we use the church during the week?" And the minister was like, "Oh, sure, it's empty all week long. Sure, you could do that." She packed the place out with all these shawlies. And she was preaching the good news about Jesus, and the members of that church got very frustrated. They got very upset, because their nice pews were being sat in by people that might have bugs on their lice or something. They don't know what, but they just didn't want them in the pews. And so they complained to the minister, and eventually they had to find another place. Well, Amy Carmichael, she's a young lady. She was maybe in her late teens, early 20s. And she said, "Well, we need to build a tabernacle then." And so she figured out ways of collecting money from different people, and they built their own tabernacle. They found land and they built it. It had a tin roof. It was a structure that was pretty unique in those days, and it ended up being duplicated elsewhere. And then from that Shawley Tabernacle, there were other ladies in other towns that needed this space. And Amy Carmichael, she just kept preaching the word of Jesus. And eventually, she decided, she felt the calling of God on her heart to go to Japan. She was on her way to Japan, and stuff interrupted it, and the Lord said, "Go to India." Very interesting. And the biography didn't explain, there was no explanation for her to make that huge switch. But then she ended up going to India, and she spent the rest of her life out there, to where her ministry, working with the underprivileged and the ostracized, these orphan girls she would bring into her home. She eventually had a lot of other women that joined her in that mission, to where she had a vast orphanage from all these unwanted young girls, and eventually she created a whole boys' wing of her orphanage, and she wrote this book about some of her stories. She gave it to somebody that took it back to England, and it became the best-selling book in England. The best-selling book. She had no idea, no clue at all. And so all of the Christians in England were reading these incredible stories about what she was doing, while they were the exact people a few decades before that were trying to squelch her ministry, telling her, don't work with those people. You should be thinking about, like, how do you get married? You should be thinking, who wants to marry you? What is your, what good could God be doing with you? You're just a young girl. What could you possibly accomplish? And she changed Christianity with her own influence, unbeknownst to her. She was a girl that they said, be quiet, be silent, be still, pressured to get married, pressured to conform. And she kept pushing past all those things because of the burden on her heart for Jesus. How many other girls during that time and still today gave into that pressure to conform to the expectations of society against who they were being called to be? How many others remain quiet, silent, and still, squelching their God-given drives and talents and uniquenesses because of what others might think? You be you, and be you here. God is a pretty neat God to give us so many different stories in this book. So many different stories of different people at different times doing different things, and yet all in relationship to Him and advancing the kingdom and the knowledge of salvation to people over and over again, messing up terribly, taking wrong turns, left and right, and yet God is still working through them all to bring them into a deeper, closer relationship with Himself. Jesus, as he was teaching the people, He wanted them to have an understanding of who they were, a better understanding of who God is and how they interact, of how they can trust God and how they can be themselves. In the feeding of the 5,000, for instance, as Jesus was teaching, you can imagine these people were just, in order to forget to eat, that must have been just enthralling. It must have just been mind-altering, the things that He was saying. It must have been paradigm-shifting, world-shattering, all the way through, to where by the time it's evening, Jesus says, they need to eat something. They've got to walk to get back home. So He sets them down to eat. In a time similar to that, not that exact same time, we have this sermon by Jesus recorded in the book of Matthew, and it begins in chapter 5. Matthew 5, 6, and 7 is one sermon by Jesus. We don't have a lot of things. We don't have any of the books written by Jesus. Well, arguably, Revelation kind of is. But here in this section, Matthew, and if you have a Bible that has red where Jesus' words are, all these pages are red. And Jesus, he's telling people these things of the kingdom, the things that are invisible to them. And one of the things He talks about is them. And in Matthew chapter 5, beginning in verse 13, He used two illustrations that I think you're very familiar with, but I doubt it's been as effective as it can be if you apply these things right now and experience them in the rest of today, and all next week, and into your life after that. Matthew chapter 5, beginning in verse 13, He says this: "You are the salt of the earth." Let's pause for a second. Salt. There's a video trending. I should have had it to show us. I'm sorry. There's a video trending on Twitter and all the trending things about this lady that says, I'm going to try and give these birds that I've been feeding. She got them to where they'd fly up to her hand and eat out of a cup in her hand. And she goes, I've been giving them salted peanuts. I put plain peanuts in. And so she holds up this cup and this little fin. She flies up and then grabs a peanut, and everything slows down in the video. And this dramatic music comes up. And this bird tastes the peanut, and then kind of looks to the side at her, and then kind of has it in his beak, and he drops it, he turns around, and he flies off. He's like, I don't even want it. Where's the salt? Where's the good stuff? Have you ever eaten something without enough salt? It's just bland. It has no flavor. It's insipid. It's disgusting. And you think, this needs some salt. Please, I can't eat anymore. Please, can I have some salt? He said, you are the salt of the earth. As Christians, sometimes we take this and we say, we're the salt of the earth. But in our minds, or at least in our actions, the salt is actually a bunch of salt in a salt shaker sitting on the table. Look at us being salt. We're being good salt all together in a little salt shaker in our very carefully crafted, protected container. But if we're the salt of the earth, how do you put salt in a lasagna? Do you pour it into one corner? No. You sprinkle it throughout to give the flavor, to make it taste delicious. Salt being spread out around in the earth, not to be quarantined up by ourselves, away from the world. Jesus says, I don't ask that you're taken out of the world. I ask that you be in the world, but that you're not of the world. You have a different flavor. You have the fragrance of salvation. I mean, this is what we are. But then he continues, but you are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its flavor, how shall it be seasoned? It is then good for nothing but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. If we recognize, sometimes as Christians we think, I have to be like Christ, and it's true. But to recognize that we are Christians, Christian was a derogatory term back in the day when it was first being used. It's like saying, those are a bunch of little Christs running around. Well, good. We grabbed onto that, now we use it. We are little Christs, we are Christians. We are people that resemble Christ, not perfectly, but we have this savor to us, and we flavor the spaces that we enter into, the relationships that we make. And if we lose that flavor, then what good is that? Christ made you special. He made you unique. It's not the whole snowflake concept. I'm saying that you have something valuable, that if you hold it back, you being less of who you are, then that the purpose that you have in the world as Christ is muted. It's reserved, and the world is worse off because you have held back. In the same way, if take the acting illustration, if you are stepping in that space and you're not yourself, and you're trying to be like someone else, then what's the end of that except for you to be trampled by everyone else's wishes, everyone else's goals for you, rather than what God is leading you to yourself? You have to be trampled over because so-and-so wants you to be this, and that person wants you to be that, and then that person wants you to be this in order to be appreciated by them. And you're just going to be walked all over because you're not fully yourself. You've reserved who you are back from what the world needs. The world needs you. You are the salt of the earth. But if you're not going to be salty, then what good is that? Verse 14. Then Jesus, he goes from salt, he then says, light. You are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do they light a lamp and put it under a basket, but put it on a lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. To be light, we all have sung that song, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. And my favorite part was hide it under a bushel. No! And we ripped that off. That light, salt and light. I heard a quote once that I've not forgotten. That, oh, now I forgot it. That all the darkness in all the world cannot put out one flame. All the darkness that exists in any space cannot squelch one little flame, flickering flame. That flame will give light to everyone that's in that space, especially when it's set up high. And Jesus says, you are the light of the world. He is the light of the world, but he's also the light through us. You are the light of the world. And if if you cover that up in a bushel, what good does that do anyone? To be salt or to be light, does the salt in the salt shaker have to be like, oh, be salty, be salty, be salty? Does it have anxiety as it's about to be poured out into your food? No. Do these light bulbs, when we turn them on, do they go, oh, wait, what am I supposed to do again? Light is light. Salt is salty. It just is what it is. Be who you are. Who is God calling you to be? Not what do your parents want you to be. Not what does Christianity as a organization want you to be. Not what does society want you to be. But who are you? Be salt, be light, be you. According to Jesus, and how he presents this in his sermon, this little tiny section that I wonder how fast he went through it, but it's amazing how much it stuck in at least Matthew's mind and whoever else was listening. It must have been something they repeated over and over again, to where when they saw the candle that night, or when they ate that food the next day and it was salty, I wonder if they just were constantly reminded they are that for the world. According to Jesus, according to this illustration of salt and light from his Sermon on the Mount, who you are is also essentially tied to the witness and mission of the church in community. That when he says, be salt, salt can't be salty unless it's tasted. Salt can't be salty by itself. It has to be spread out throughout the food. And then in conjunction with that larger space, then it serves its purpose. And in light is something that he describes as being a city on the hill. And in those days, the only place you would get light is when you get cities. I mean, when you fly over at night over the United States, if you've ever looked out the window, you see where the towns are, where the cities are, because you can see the light from them. And everything else is just darkness. And the city set on a hill, it cannot be hidden. And then when a lamp is put on a basket, on a lampstand, it gives light to all who are in the house. There is a work that's being done when you truly are the light that you are or the salt that you are. It affects the people that are around you. It benefits the people in the household that you're in, or in the group that you're in every space that you're in. It benefits them. I'm asking you this, to turn it to the church specifically. What do you have to share with this community? What do you have to share with your family? You have yourself. Some people, now, they can't be themselves in their family. They can't, they're told to be quiet, that their opinion doesn't matter. They're told that the aspirations that they have, or the drives, maybe like Amy Carmichael, maybe like some of these other pillars of faith that you experience. Stories are written about people that break the mold, right? There's people that don't have families or spaces that they're able to be in. Some of us among us have chosen their own family, among their friends or co-workers. We've chosen this church. This is the place that we've chosen to be a part of, to contribute our whole full selves. And in order to contribute our full selves, it means that we must be fully known for who we truly are. And that means that there has to be conversations and storytelling and relationship opportunities, like going out to eat or a picnic, not this Sunday but the next, in Bryce Canyon Park at 10:30 to 2. Oh, there's a flyer out below. Or picking up the telephone and calling people, because or hopping on Zoom and making those connections, being at Sabbath school or staying after church and just hanging out in the outside there, just talking, sharing your story, asking somebody else what is their story. These things, these spaces are how we get to be known. It's how we are salty. It's how we are liked. Otherwise, we're lighting our candle and running someplace where there's nobody else. Or we're saying, I'm salty, but I'll see you later. These spaces are essential. Let's continue to be real by ourselves, but also be real in our church community. And just like I love you because you are unique, and I'm learning more about who you are, and you're learning more about who I am. We're learning about each other. This church, I love this church. We are a church that's willing to be raw and real with each other, to be in each other's spaces and to allow other people to be who they are and to make this space. When I came into this church, I asked Pastor Katz and the leaders of the church, like, who are we as a church? Tell me so I can understand. And it was wonderful to hear that the kind of ethos that has propelled the church forward has been, come as you are. Come as you are. Don't try and change yourself in order to come to church. Come as you are. And whether that means you're coming in certain clothes that you feel, oh, I couldn't really go to church in this, but that's what you have, then come. Come as you are. Come happy and excited or sleepy and reluctant, but come be a part of the church fellowship, to be a part of this space. Let's continue to be real. The people, I love that our church, we're full of people rich in eagerness, people that are also low in unnecessary petty drama. That's something that came to mind. We're high in genuine care when someone is in need. We're very genuine, a very genuine church. There's a reality where we're at as a church, because I want to be real, is there's some things that we're working towards. One, we're aiming towards a critical capacity for fellowship, for the operations of the church. We don't have enough people to take on every responsibility that needs to be taken on as part of a church community, where we don't have these, another reference, mavericks just running around by themselves, doing everything by themselves. To have teams, to be able to support each other and step in when someone can't be there that week, to be able to have these different systems in our church. The Lord has made us with this incredible body with all of these different systems, the circulatory system, the skeletal system, immune system, what other systems? Respiratory system, digestive system. But they all work together, and they don't work by themselves. And they accomplish all the great things. And when when one part is missing, then the whole body suffers. So critical capacity is still ahead of us. We're aiming towards that, and that just means people with enough, we want diversity. We want every talent and interest and each person investing themselves in these different areas of our church, so we can be fully functioning and moving ahead. Currently, the reality is that we're at our tithe, which pays for pastoral attention helps support that, as well as administrative costs like payroll and HR and legal and all those things that happen at the conference level that we benefit from. We're right now, last year and this year, we're still on track for that, for a halftime pastoral attention. And so we're districted with Hollywood, and it's been a wonderful thing because we're able to have, I'm able to be here in a halftime capacity, but yet a little more because of the arrangements that we've made. And we're moving forward and we're stable, and that's the first time in 20 years that our church has met that amount of tithe, and it's an incredible achievement. And if that continues and in fact increases, we may be able to bring another pastor or maybe an associate or something special into the pastoral team for this district. That's something gets reevaluated every 2 years. We've got another year and a half to go. So it's a wonderful thing that we're a wonderful track that we're on, and I'm very excited about that. We have a mid-year update that we'll have for you to pass out next week, so that way you can just see some information about what's been happening in our church on different logistical details. And then the third point, the reality is when it comes to affording like the roof renovation and these other details, we have many generous givers in our church that have given towards that in offering to the general church budget as well as specific to the roofing project. But as a church, financially, we are dependent on the rental income to a very significant degree for qualifying for the roof loan, but we're able to pay for that every month. But that rental income is an important thing. So our partnership with the other churches, although it does benefit us and we benefit them in a very mutually happy, trying to figure it out all together in the same space arrangement, that is something we do depend on. So these are a few of the details. If you'd like to hear more about logistics, I don't want to bore you, but I want to encourage you in the way that you support the church, how you give yourself. It's not just about finances. That often comes down to that. But who you are is essential. What you have to give is irreplaceable. And just like any organ in the body, when you're not able to give everything of who you are, just to enjoy this church community, then the whole body, it misses you. So if there's some way that you have a passion, you have an interest, and you want to invest it but you don't know how, let's talk. This is a community that we want to know the true you self. A little bit of my story, and I don't think I've shared this aspect. Maybe I have, and I hope that you'll appreciate it. I didn't know what it was like to be in a church community. When I grew up, we would go to different churches, and that gave me a great variety perspective, a wonderful experience of understanding different types of churches and different people all throughout my hometown area. I think there were 4 or 5 churches within 15 minutes of each other. So it was pretty much, which church you want to go to this Sabbath? And that was a lot of fun growing up. But it wasn't until I became a pastor when I understood what it was like to know who people were week to week. To hear what happened one Sabbath and then the next Sabbath to connect with them and say, well, how did that go? What happened that week? Texting was still new at that time, I think. So, but we wouldn't text each other, but to call or to see each other in person at different events or Sabbath school, that was something that enriched my life. So much so to where I looked forward to Sabbath. Some people, they look forward to the weekend because they get to go clubbing. And they're just like, oh, I can get through this work week, so I do that. I was looking forward to Sabbath, to be able to be with the church community that was mine. And I'll put her on blast right now. We have Sherry Elkins, our bookkeeper. She was a part of the church in Simi Valley when I was a wee little associate, 25 years old. jumped into the ministry, and I just had such a great time. And she was a part of that community that just, people loved each other. And I often think about how Ellen White, the angel told her, press together, press together, press together. We have to press together. This world is so hard. There's so many things happening in our experiences, and too many of us feel alone. Either because we don't know who to go to, we don't know how we can be supported, or we don't know if we'll be supported. If you're a part of this church, I'm going to ask that you make a commitment that you will support people that come into your life, that share with you who they are, and that you be vulnerable. Allow yourself to share the experiences that you've gone through. You don't always have to talk about the deep, hard things, but you just, what happened during the week? And just be interested in what they went through. I've often said that the 30 minutes before and the 30 minutes after worship, these times when we're just meeting each other and talking and getting to know each other right out here, that's the most sacred space on campus. Be a part of that fellowship. Be yourself. This is a bland, dark world. We are salt and we are light. We are genuine. We are all in, and we are bringing everyone else in that we can possibly get in contact with. May I pray for you? Our Father, we are gifted by you giving us ourselves, teaching us each day who we are, how you see us as your children, the unique gifts and interests and passions that you put in our hearts. And you promise that you will give us the desires of our hearts. And sometimes it seems too big or too fantastical, but we'll trust you that you will give us the desires of our hearts even here inside of your house, in this space, in this community that's called by your name. Give us the boldness, please, God. Like your daughter Amy Carmichael so long ago, that was just herself. And it changed thousands of lives, trajectories of people's existence into ones of peace and safety and happiness and joy and eternity. And we want to be used the same. Help us, God, to see who you are, and to see ourselves in your eyes, not in the mirror, not through the comments and compliments or critiques of other people, but through your eyes. Thank you for that peace and that promise. Thank you for being our Creator God and our Redeemer God. We ask and pray these things in Jesus' name.